Transactional analysis process scripts. We've talked a little about life scripts and how these have come about. As far as leading a successful life goes, we concluded that scripty behavior stems from the child ego state. In other words, a person's behavior doesn't always stem from a logical assessment from the adult ego state, but from the decisions of the child, which more often than not don't conform to reality. The child's interpretations of events and stimuli become reality, so to speak, and lay down the rails on which one's train moves forward. In this section, we'll talk about process scripts. These scripts are the overarching patterns or underlying assumptions upon which life scripts run. They describe, as Stewart and Joins and TA Today point out, the way or pattern by which a person lives out their script. The process scripts are as follows: 1. Until, 2. After, 3. Never, 4. Always, 5. Almost, 6. Open-ended. You may notice as we go through these process scripts, the adaptive child ego state is the fundamental core of these scripts. This is because, in my mind anyhow, they are a reaction of the adaptive child to the critical parent. In other words, this child is still living under the conditions for receiving the positive strokes from the critical parent and continuing to live under this condition as the basis for his or her life script behavior. The first process script is until. This script simply states that I can't feel, be, or have X until I have fulfilled some condition. For example, I can't feel good about myself until I have $100,000 in my bank account. I can't feel good about myself until I weigh what I did in high school. I can't take a vacation until I have saved enough money up for my children's education. Eric Berne used Greek gods as an analogy to all of these process scripts. According to Stewart and Joins, this script is embodied in Hercules, who had to complete a series of tasks in order to reach demigod status. For those living under this process script, they will find themselves putting off a task they know they should do now, waiting on the fulfillment of an outside circumstance to give them the green light. They may also never be able to feel good about themselves until certain conditions be met. As we stated earlier, the adaptive child's self-esteem is dictated by the critical parent. But really, it is an interpretation alone on the part of the child. It must be stressed that it's not reality. The adult, if allowed to operate, would say that the critical parent is the one with the problem. As a matter of fact, the injunctions of the critical parent stems from the fact that this parent is an adaptive child that needs to validate himself by placing conditions on the child of his child or children. So when you look at it that way, continuing to live under this process script doesn't make much sense. That is, when you realize that you don't have to and should never live by the injunctions of the critical parent. So rather than living according to the until, you can make adult choices to be, do, have right now in the free child ego state. I would go so far as to say that these critical parent produced scripts are just as bad as narcotics addictions because so few people ever escape their grip. That's because so few ever realize why they act the way they do, because it has become an unquestioned assumption of who a person is. The next process script is the after script. In this script, a person worries about the consequences and worries about what will happen after he or she takes a certain action. Stewart and Joins state that people in this category will often start their sentences off with a hi, then comes the fulcrum point represented by but. For example, I would like to talk to that girl, but she will probably reject me. I would like to become rich, but I'm probably spinning my wheels. In these cases, the adaptive child assumes the futility of becoming a free child. The fundamental assumption of this script is future shackles or calamity. Berne represented this script with the ruler Damocles, who spent his time eating, drinking, and partying. However, one day he noticed that a sword was hanging over his head, suspended by a single horsehair. He realized that he could never be truly happy again because the sword could drop at any moment. People under this script will say to themselves, why even try? They forget the fact that the universe operates on cause and effect. If they would pick out a role model, someone successful, and do whatever their role model does, they could be successful too. They have followed the proverbial critical parent model of, if you get a BB gun, you're going to shoot your eye out. So rather than go out into the world and do something worthy, they spend their lives being cut again and again by an imaginary sword of Damocles, dropping day by day on their dreams. They're not protecting their adaptive child as they think, they're preventing it from truly becoming free. The next process script is never. Stewart and Joines state that this script is embodied in the phrase, I can never get what I want most. In a later issue, we'll talk about discounts in transactional analysis in greater depth. Here, though, we'll briefly mention them. In the never process script, the person discounts or deletes his or her own ability to reach a desired end. It is like if you go on vacation, you have a wonderful time, but one negative thing happens. Someone was really rude to you, for example. You may go home and not remember all the positive aspects of your vacation. You only remember the negative. In other words, you have discounted all the positive aspects and the negative has become the focal point. Byrne equates this life script to the mythical figure of Tantalus, who was condemned to eternally stand in a pool of water between a supply of food on the one side and potable or drinkable water on the other. Now Tantalus stood there forever, frozen between the two, not realizing that he could just step to either side and quench his thirst or satisfy his hunger. In essence, Tantalus was a prisoner first and foremost in his own mind. He discounted the fact that he could both eat and drink and didn't need to be trapped between the two. As far as TA is concerned, we can say that the adaptive child has learned that it shouldn't risk a step forward because it fears the rejection of the critical parent, which is all imaginary actually, because we're not children anymore. The adaptive child has learned that it cannot please the critical parent through past experience, so it forever stands between the two options. It will not risk another attempt forward towards what it really wants because history has taught it that it is better off not to move at all. Once again, the adaptive child can find freedom when it realizes that it doesn't have to please the critical parent to feel good about itself. Just like the sword of Damocles, that negative future is an illusion. This is true only as long as the adaptive child stops believing the lies told by the critical parent. If something bad happens, it should not affect the self-image of the child. It has nothing to do with the child. The sword of Damocles is merely the acceptance of the critical parent messaging as fact. Obviously, it's not. The free child, then, does not discount options. It does not make either-or propositions to itself. It steps into whatever direction that brings it lasting freedom.